breath, and we'll get going with the questions. And we will start with Jerry. Would you support a tax cut or budget reductions to balance the budget?
I truly think we should look at some budget reductions. I think we need to be fiscally sound and justify all of our spending. You know, businesses and individuals all have to do cutbacks at this point, so I believe the city also needs to do that. But we also need to take a serious look at what we are cutting. So, you know, for me, not being on the council right now, it's very difficult for me to tell you which items that I would look at, but I think it's important to balance that budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Same question, Joe Orrick.
There's really two things here with spending of your tax dollars. One, we have to spend it wisely. If it's not being spent wisely, it doesn't matter where it's going. It has to be done correctly. We, as parents, we all have said no to our children. And when we're looking at a budget that is in this economic climate, we're going to have to say no. And that's an okay thing to do. Some things, however, you can't say no to. There are fixed costs that a city has no choice in operating. It has those costs. So we're going to have to look at the extras. Maybe the fire department wants something that they can hold off for 1 year. Maybe the ice arena has something they can wait on themselves. It's not that I don't want to spend money. I want to make sure that we spend it wisely. A tax cut would be a very nice thing, but not sitting on the council, it'd be very difficult for me to say I would support a tax cut. But in these times, we definitely have to look at budget reductions.
All right, thank you. Ken?
Well, actually, you know, the first thing, taxes are a huge fiscal responsibility to the city and the city council as well. You know, the city has a very, very good professional staff on board who works with a pretty tight budget, and they work out all the details throughout the year. You know, planning for a budget takes, you know, many months throughout the year. So to me, there really is not typically a lot left over in the budget. However, to answer the question, if we had consecutive years, multiple years of excess funding, yeah, I'd be all in favor of a tax cut if it's all possible. With that being said, if there is a surplus, to me that means the city is being fiscally responsible and meeting their budget to what they intended.
All right, thank you. Larry Millender, same question.
Absolutely, I would support a tax cut, tax reduction, and I would support a reduction in the budget and work extremely hard to do both of those two items.
All right, thank you. Myron?
Each year, the city staff and council have an ongoing saga called budgeting, and the review of budgets and the adjustments of budgets and the transfer of funds goes on almost year-round. The process works well. It's worked well in all the companies I've worked for, large and small. We have an excellent city staff who keep track of things for us, and we always look at reducing the expenses as much as we can. We look at ways to gain revenue as well. I like to reduce expenses down to the bare necessities, and if necessary, we also cut taxes accordingly. So, yes and yes.
All right, thank you. Jim?
You know, I'm a homeowner like the rest of you, and every time that envelope shows up that tells me I'm about to pay more taxes, I cringe as I'm opening the envelope. It's a fact of life, but I think that in my experience as a VP at various businesses that I've worked at, I've been given a budget and I've been given a P&L, and I've been told very often somewhere down the road that that number has changed and I'm going to have to adapt on how to get things done with a little bit less money. And that's no different than how we run our homes. We all have a fixed amount of income that we have to deal with. But for a city, I think that we need to look at how do we limit new expenditures? How can we make sure that, as several have said, how do we make sure that we can get things done perhaps with something that we already have in our inventory? How can we stretch something until the next year? You know, Maybe you don't need something that you had budgeted because there are pressing demands elsewhere. So I think fundamentally I'm opposed to tax increases. I would support a budget cut. I think that we need to look very carefully through the budgets that we have and find things that may or may not be dire at that point in time. I think that our city is run very well, and I can't say one way or another, not having had the luxury of going through line item by line item, but fundamentally I am not in favor of raising taxes. So that means that fundamentally I am in favor of cuts and tax reductions as well.
All right, thank you. And I do have Narvel Brooks' written responses. We have no written responses from Leland Otto, so there will be no response from that candidate. Narvel's response to that question: this is the wrong time to be considering tax increases, if I understand the intent of this question. There are ways to creatively work on the budget and be fiscally responsible. My approach would be similar to that taken by the council last year when the community was stricken with a budget crisis due to a clerical error which reverberated from state capital to Waconia. Deferral of expenditures, working with surrounding communities to pool resources, major equipment expenditures, are examples of how I would start to address this issue. Narvel Brooks.